Testing, testing. Is this thing on? Can anybody hear me? I can hear you, but you might want to get a little louder for the clowns in the back. Hey, clowns in the back, can you hear me okay?
Oh, yeah, we can hear you real good. But you might want to get this thing started because the Joker is starting to pick a fight with Bozo.
Excellent. And, okay, so let's get this going. Today is going to be an interesting broadcast. We're going to actually talk about something, kind of serious. How many of you have taken the time out of your day to Google JFK's last speech? Now, why would that speech be important? Well, an American president who was shot, I would think that every American would make it a duty of their own to find out what the last thing he said was. It makes sense to me. Does it make sense to you? Well, I tell you what, you're not going to have to do no Googling. I went ahead and did the Googling for us, and I'm going to play it for you now.
Now, I used to be able to just Google JFK's last speech, and it would pull it right on up. But now, it seems to be a little bit more harder to find. So, what I ended up typing in to find it was JFK's speech, Secret Society.
Waldorf Astoria Hotel, New York City, April 27, 1961.
Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, I appreciate very much your generous invitation to be here tonight. You bear heavy responsibilities these days, and the article I read some time ago reminded me of how particularly heavily the burdens of present-day events bear upon your profession. You may remember that in 1851, the New York Herald Tribune, under the sponsorship and publishing of Horace Greeley, employed as its London correspondent an obscure journalist by the name of Karl Marx.
Now, I'm super curious as to why JFK started this particular 20-minute speech with this mention towards Marx, Karl Marx. I don't know who Karl Marx is. I never met the guy. I've heard of something called Marxism or something, but I don't know much about that. And so I will be doing my research, though, because I'm super curious on how this interplays with everything else.
We are told that foreign correspondent Marx, stone broke, and with a family ill and undernourished, constantly appealed to Greeley and managing editor Charles Dana for an increase in his munificent salary of $5 per installment, a salary which he and Engels ungratefully labeled as the lousiest petty bourgeois cheating. But when all his financial appeals were refused, Marx looked around for other means of livelihood and fame, eventually terminating his relationship with the Tribune and devoting his talents full-time to the cause that would bequeath to the world the seeds of Leninism, Stalinism, revolution, and the Cold War. If only this capitalistic New York newspaper had treated him more kindly. If only Marx had remained a foreign correspondent, history might have been different. And I hope all publishers will bear this lesson in mind the next time they receive a poverty-stricken appeal from a small increase in the expense account from an obscure newspaper man. I I have selected as the title of my remarks tonight, The President and the Press. Some may suggest that this would be more naturally worded, the President versus the press, but those are not my sentiments tonight. It is true, however, that when a well-known diplomat from another country demanded recently that our State Department repudiate certain newspaper attacks on his colleague, it was unnecessary for us to reply that this administration was not responsible for the press, for the press had already made it clear that it was not responsible for this administration. Nevertheless, my purpose here tonight is not to deliver the usual assault on the so-called one-party press. On the contrary, in recent months, I have rarely heard any complaints about political bias in the press, except from a few Republicans. Nor is it my purpose tonight to discuss or defend the televising of presidential press conferences. I think it is highly beneficial to have some 20 million Americans regularly sit in on these conferences to observe, if I may say so, the incisive, the intelligent, and the courteous qualities displayed by your Washington correspondents. Nor, finally, are these remarks intended to examine the proper degree of privacy which the press should allow to any president and his family. If, in the last few months, your White House reporters and photographers have been attending church services with regularity, that has surely done them no harm. On the other hand, I realize that your staff and wire service photographers may be complaining that they do not enjoy the same green privileges, the local golf courses, which they once did. It is true that my predecessor did not object, as I do, to pictures of one's golfing skill in action, but neither, on the other hand, did he ever be a Secret Service man. My topic tonight is a more sober one, of concern to publishers as well as editors.
Well, you might notice that right about now is about the time the crowd quits laughing. He was being pretty funny at first, loosening the crowd up. But what he's about to say, it's not a joke.
Yeah, it might be a really good idea to start paying attention.
I want to talk about our common responsibilities in the face of a common danger. The events of recent weeks may have helped to illuminate that challenge for some, but the dimensions of its threat have loomed large on the horizon for many years. Whatever our hopes may be for the future, for reducing this threat or living with it, there is no escaping either the gravity or the totality of its challenge to our survival and to our security. A challenge that confronts us in unaccustomed ways in every sphere of human activity. This deadly challenge imposes upon our society two requirements of direct concern, both to the press and to the president.
File your taxes free.
Two requirements that may seem almost contradictory in tone, but which must be reconciled and fulfilled if we are to meet this national peril. I refer first to the need for far greater public information, and second, to the need for far greater official secrecy. The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society, and we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. We decided long ago that the dangers of excessive and unwarranted concealment of pertinent facts far outweighed the dangers which are cited to justify it. Even today, there is little value in opposing the threat of a closed society by imitating its arbitrary restrictions. Even today, there is little value in ensuring the survival of our nation if our traditions do not survive with it. And there is very grave danger that an announced need for increased security will be seized upon by those anxious to expand its meaning to the very limits of official censorship and concealment. That I do not intend to permit to the extent that it's in my control.
Yeah, that's probably the statement that got that man shot.
And no official of my administration, whether his rank is high or low, civilian or military, should interpret my words here tonight as an excuse to censor the news, to stifle dissent, to cover up our mistakes, or to withhold from the press and the public the facts they deserve to know. But I do ask every publisher, every editor, and every newsman in the nation to re-examine his own standards and to recognize the nature of our country's peril. In time of war, the government and the press have customarily joined in an effort based largely on self-discipline to prevent unauthorized disclosures to the enemy. In times of clear and present danger, the courts have held that even the privileged rights of the First Amendment must yield to the public's need for national security. Today, no war has been declared, and however fierce the struggle may be, it may never be declared in the traditional fashion. Our way of life is under attack. Those who make themselves our enemy are advancing around the globe. The survival of our friends is in danger. And yet no war has been declared. No borders have been crossed by marching troops. No missiles have been fired. If the press is awaiting a declaration of war before it imposes the self-discipline of combat conditions, then I can only say that no war ever posed a greater threat to our security. If you are awaiting a finding of clear and present danger, then I can only say that the danger has never been more clear, and its presence has never been more imminent. It requires a change in outlook, a change in tactics, a change in missions by the government, by the people, by every businessman or labor leader, and by every newspaper. For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised. No expenditure is questioned, no rumor is printed, no secret is revealed. It conducts the Cold War, in short, with a wartime discipline no democracy would ever hope or wish to match. Nevertheless, every democracy recognizes the necessary restraints of national security. And the question remains whether those restraints need to be more strictly observed if we are to oppose this kind of attack as well as outright invasion. For the facts of the matter are that this nation's foes have openly boasted of acquiring through our newspapers information they would otherwise hire agents to acquire through theft, bribery, or espionage. That details of this nation's covert preparations to counter the enemy's covert operations have been available to every newspaper reader, friend and foe alike. That the size, the strength, the location, and the nature of our forces and weapons, and our plans and strategy for their use have all been pinpointed in the press and other news media, to a degree sufficient to satisfy any foreign power, and that in at least one case, the publication of details concerning a secret mechanism whereby satellites were followed required its alteration at the expense of considerable time and money. The newspapers which printed these stories were loyal, patriotic, responsible, and well-meaning.
Now, of course, I had to cut the video here because of commercial, but if you notice in the timestamp, going back into it, there is obviously some soundbite that is missing here. I will be looking for that, so if you have a clue how I can find that, please let me know. But here's what I found.
Only the tests of journalism and not the tests of national security. And my question tonight is whether additional tests should not now be adopted. That question is for you alone to answer. No public official should answer it for you. No governmental plan should impose its restraints against your will. But I would be failing in my duty to the nation in considering all of the responsibilities that we now bear and all of the means at hand to meet those responsibilities if I did not commend this problem to your attention and urge its thoughtful consideration. On many earlier occasions I have said, and your newspapers have constantly said, that these are times that appeal to every citizen's sense of sacrifice and self-discipline. They call out to every citizen to weigh his rights and comforts against his obligations to the common good. I cannot now believe that those citizens who serve in the newspaper business consider themselves exempt from that appeal. I have no intention of establishing a new Office of War Information to govern the flow of news. I am not suggesting any new forms of censorship or new types of security classifications. I have no easy answer to the dilemma that I have posed and would not seek to impose it if I had one. But I am asking the members of the newspaper profession and the industry in this country to re-examine their own responsibilities, to consider the degree and the nature of the present danger, and to heed the duty of self-restraint, which that danger imposes upon us all. Every newspaper now asks itself, with respect to every story, is it news? All I suggest is that you add the question, is it in the interest of national security? And I hope that every group in America, unions and businessmen and public officials at every level, will ask the same question of their endeavors and subject their actions to this same exacting test. And should the press of America consider and recommend the voluntary assumption of specific new steps or machinery, I can assure you that we will cooperate wholeheartedly with those recommendations. Perhaps there will be no recommendations. Perhaps there is no answer to the dilemma faced by a free and open society in a cold and secret war. In times of peace, any discussion of this subject and any action that results are both painful and without precedent. But this is a time of peace and peril, which knows no precedent in history. It is the unprecedented nature of this challenge that also gives rise to your second obligation, an obligation which I share. And that is our obligation to inform and alert the American people, to make certain that they possess all the facts that they need and understand them as well, the perils, the prospects, the purposes of our program, and the choices that we face. No president should fear public scrutiny of his program, for from that scrutiny comes understanding, and from that understanding comes support or opposition, and both are necessary. I am not asking your newspapers to support an administration, but I am asking your help in the tremendous task of informing and alerting the American people. For I have complete confidence in the response and dedication of our citizens whenever they are fully informed. I not only could not stifle controversy among your readers, I welcome it. This administration intends to be candid about its errors. For as a wise man once said, an error doesn't become a mistake until you refuse to correct it.
Okay, so after the whole Marx topic, he then spoke about a secret society that has trying to take over in the dark. I believe he's speaking about something that's developed from the Cold War. I don't know much about the Cold War. Hey Google, what was the Cold War?
Okay, so let's go ahead and review this together. The Cold War was an ongoing political rivalry between the United States and the Soviet Union and their respective allies. That developed after World War II. It was waged mainly on political, economic, and propaganda fronts and lasted until 1991. Okay, let's see what some common questions are. What was the Cold War? Short summary. The Cold War was an ongoing political rivalry between the United States and Soviet Union. Okay, same thing. That's what everybody asked. What was the Cold War, right? Okay, so let's see if we can find a better question rather than coming up with our own. Let's see. Why was it called the Cold War? I like that one. As World War II was ending, the Cold War began. This was to be a long-lasting and continuing confrontation between the Soviet Union and the United States, lasting from 1945 to 1989. It was called the Cold War because neither the Soviet Union nor the United States officially declared war on each other. So, in short, it was kind of like a secret war. Everybody, from 1945, to, that was after the whole Germany incident, and to 1989. Now, what stopped the Cold War? Did it actually stop? I mean, what made the Cold War? What made people think that the Cold War was just over? How did America win the Cold War? Let's see. Historians who believe that the U.S. won the Cold War largely agree that American victory was guaranteed through finances. The United States bled the Soviets dry through proxy wars and the nuclear arms race. But this financial draining may not have been possible without the unprecedented stockpiling of nuclear weapons. So that's basically it. What considered the Cold War over was the fact that America had so many nuclear weapons that if anybody messed with us, we would blow the world up. Yeah, it ended because, supposedly ended because we held the world hostage and told everybody to start acting right. That might have been good if we would have also acted right. Did we? So even in that, it didn't really even tell us what the Cold War was or what the argument was about.
But we can do some more studying and figure out what that was about. Importantly, it was China and Russia disagreeing with the United States about something. Yeah, but it's all okay now because it ended in 1989 or maybe 1991 or maybe if it was a secret war, maybe maybe it's not over.
Let's not get off topic. What is it JFK was talking about?
Well, JFK was trying to tell people about the problem of secret meetings making decisions. He saw some sort of problem with that, because through the Cold War, we definitely had to have secret proceedings. Uh, um, but he was worried about how secretive they were allowing themselves to be, and he didn't agree with that. He strongly didn't agree with that.
Also, he brought up the fact that being too open with certain military procedures being broadcasted in our news, that wasn't a good idea either. So, man, it was a fine line to walk, a real tough cookie to crumble. Basically, he opposed secret meetings, wanted everybody to be able to make informed group decisions openly, and then he got shot.
We intend to accept full responsibility for our errors, and we expect you to point them out when we miss them. Without debate, without criticism, no administration and no country can succeed, and no republic can survive. That is why the Athenian lawmaker Solon decreed it a crime for any citizen to shrink from controversy.
Decreed it a crime for any citizen to shrink from controversy.
I personally like the responsibility he places on the press for accurate reporting of the news.
That is why the Athenian lawmaker Solon decreed it a crime for any citizen to shrink from controversy. And that is why our press was protected by the First Amendment, the only business in America specifically protected by the Constitution, not primarily to amuse and entertain, not to emphasize the trivial and the sentimental, not to simply give the public what it wants, but to inform, to arouse, to reflect, to state our dangers and our opportunities, to indicate our crises and our choices, to lead, mold, educate, and sometimes even anger public opinion. This means greater coverage and analysis of international news, for it is no longer far away and foreign, but close at hand and local. It means greater attention to improved understanding of the news, as well as improved transmission. And it means, finally, that government at all levels must meet its obligation to provide you with the fullest possible information outside the narrowest limits of national security, and we intend to do it. It was early in the 17th century that Francis Bacon remarked on three recent inventions already transforming the world: the compass, gunpowder, and the printing press. Now the links between the nations, first forged by the compass, have made us all citizens of the world, the hopes and threats of one becoming the hopes and threats of us all. In that one world's effort to live together, the evolution of gunpowder to its ultimate limit has warned mankind of the terrible consequences of failure. And so it is to the printing press, to the recorder of man's deeds, the keeper of his conscience, the courier of his news, that we look for strength and assistance, confident that with your help, man will be what he was born to be, free and independent.
Okay, so that was a pretty serious speech he had there. Yep. So, I want to thank you all for watching that with me. And, if you've watched all this so far, then you might be in the right mindset to watch this next. It might be like 20 minutes, 25 minutes, but I promise you, you're going to want to watch this.
Today, it's fashionable to tear down America's past and attack its core values.
Are we doing a good enough job teaching our children what America is and what she represents?
We have a choice. Will we teach our kids to stand for truth in a culture of lies?
We'll preserve for our children this, the last best hope of man on earth, or we'll sentence them to take the last step into 1,000 years of darkness.
Conservakids. Raise kids who love America.
Be only his second domestic press conference since taking office. It comes just one day before he'll mark 1 full year in office. And it comes as he faces growing challenges on multiple fronts. The latest Omicron.
Last time I was here, I think I talked about my boys. I just want y'all to know that they are all here today, and they are very protective, and they don't fight fair, so let's keep it nice. And before I begin, I want to start by expressing my appreciation for all of y'all coming today, all of my patience, your kind words, your letters, your messages have meant so much to me. To my awesome employees. Somehow have stood by me and not quit during all this. And I've been lucky enough to bring on 2 awesome new nurses. I've got Jennifer Bridges here. As y'all know, Jennifer stood up to Methodist Hospital. And Kimberly Peebles. Another nurse who stood up to the medical clinic of Houston. And both of those nurses, as you know, have exercised their right not to let other people decide what gets injected into their bodies. That's right. I also want to thank the people around the world that I've never met who have reached out with nice messages and kind words and have drowned out all the other people who are trying to take me down. I want to thank my attorney, Steve Mitby, who's coming out right now, for helping me navigate all this craziness, and my publicist, Wayne Dolcefino, for also helping me stand up against all the media outrage. So 2 months ago in November, Houston Methodist launched me into the public spotlight by telling the world that they were suspending my privileges for supposedly spreading dangerous misinformation about COVID. Houston Chronicle joined in that effort, and since then, I've had a lot of people publicly comment that I should lose my license. These people don't know me, they're strangers. One of the people in particular, Ariana Garcia, is a journalist for the Houston Chronicle. And 3 days ago, she published a story entitled it, "Former Houston Methodist Doctor Still Has Her License Despite Continuing to Spread COVID-19 Misinformation." Shame on her. Shame on her. Ariana does not know me. Yeah, Ariana does not know me. She never bothered to ask me to comment on this article before she published it. And neither do any of the other people who have called for my license to be removed. So I want to tell y'all what it takes to get into this spot right here. And it's not an easy journey. It's not easy to get a medical license. My path took 13 years of higher education. I had to make straight A's. Residency was the 5 hardest years of my life, mentally, physically, emotionally. But I did learn a lot, and one of my most valuable lessons was to take a critical view of pharmaceutical companies and not be the first person to prescribe the newest and latest drug until it has stood the test of time. And that has served me well when looking at COVID-19 and how we're treating it. Also, one of my favorite attendees at Stanford, he told me that we need to be wary of any new vaccines that come out and not to follow the herd, to take things with a critical view. I also learned about the culture of these big academic institutions. And they're rigid, they're hierarchical, and they breed conformity. And I knew that after residency, that was not the kind of practice I wanted to be surrounded in. Thank God. So, in the following years, I had kids, and that experience gave me a different perspective on the doctor-patient relationship. I had 4 boys in 5 years. So I was basically, I was a patient for 5 years straight. And that was eye-opening. I learned what a inefficient, impersonal, confusing healthcare system we have. And when I started this clinic, I was determined to do things differently. I have no financial ties with any third parties. I do not contract with insurance companies. I don't contract with the government. I do not take Medicare. I have no financial ties with hospitals and no financial ties with pharmaceutical companies. God bless you. The only people I work for are my patients, and I treat them the way I would want to be treated. Thank you. I'm also a strong believer in transparency, and I list all my prices on my website, and I list all my clinical data on my website. My ENT and sleep medicine practice morphed into this COVID center in response to my patients' needs and wants. To date, or actually in the last 6 months even, I have treated over 2,000 people successfully as outpatients for COVID. And I have one of these wonderful patients here today who is just now recovering from COVID. And if she had taken the traditional route, she would be in the hospital or worse right now. And she has graciously agreed to tell you her experience. Her name is Sylvia Anderson.
Before I began to share with you my experience, I like to bend my knee and bow before the King. Isn't this right? Yes. Jesus Christ, the Son of the living. Yes. It is because of Him that I live. Yes. It is because of Him that I live. And it is because I came to these doors that I am alive. When I got here, my oxygen level was 82. I could barely talk. I could barely walk. But I came in. I didn't have a full appointment. But as our Father would have it, Dr. Golden was here. And Jennifer. Jennifer told her my condition. And she came immediately. And she began to administer the meds that I needed. And so I live today because of the grace of God and because of Dr. Golden and her staff. Yes.
Thank you so much. And unfortunately, we don't have monoclonal antibodies. So I was able to treat her despite that. I gave her high-dose IV steroids. I gave her high-dose IV vitamin C. I gave her other vitamins. And I gave her high-dose ivermectin. She said, you want me to take 20 of those? I said, Yes. And then we laughed about how hard it is to get it out of the package, but she did it. And, you know, we did that for several days in a row, and then this past weekend she was able to stay home and rest, and here she is today doing great.
All right.
I think we all know that early COVID treatment works. It saves lives. And I am not going to be silenced, intimidated, or bullied by Houston Methodist, Houston Chronicle, or anyone else who wants to target physicians that question the narrative. That's right. Medical freedom has been hijacked, by hospitals, big pharma, insurance companies, and the federal agencies. Doctors, this is our time. We need to stand up and save our profession. And patients, ask yourself, do you want doctors that respect your right to informed consent and respect your right to try? Or do you want those that follow the dictates of hospitals, insurance companies, and federal agencies? No. Media companies and the bullying of physicians that don't follow the narrative, and hospitals and governments that are unwilling to share important data about the vaccines and about COVID treatments have bred mistrust amongst the public. That's true. Yes. Methodist Hospital is part of this problem. They have chosen secrecy over transparency. They have listed on their website two of their key core values are integrity and accountability, yet they won't share their data with us. The Freedom of Information Act and the Texas Business Code require nonprofits like Methodist Hospital to reveal their data. I have made formal requests and received nothing, but we have lots of questions. We want to know, of all the 1 million+ people that you have vaccinated, how many of those have had an adverse reaction, and what are they?
Yes. It's the highest number ever.
Why is it Channel 2 asking these questions? Exactly. And then of all the people who have recently been admitted with COVID, how many of those people are fully vaccinated? How many of your fully vaccinated employees are having breakthrough cases? And of the 2,879 patients that have died in your hospitals, how many of them were refused early treatment? Yes. Financially, we have a lot of questions. In 2019, Methodist Hospital reported over $4 billion in assets. This was before COVID. Let's see what they've done since COVID. How much have your executives profited from the COVID windfall? Do you have any financial relationships with the vaccine companies? How much are you making from the vaccines? How much have you been rewarded by giving remdesivir? And what have your complications been from giving remdesivir? Because they have not responded to my request for information, I've decided to take legal action against Methodist. Make this clear, I'm not seeking any financial gains from this or personal gain. I'm simply seeking the truth, which we all deserve.
Yeah.
So I am open to any questions. Love you.
Doctor, obviously this has been a polarizing issue on many fronts. Has there been support that you've seen from other doctors nationwide that have reached out to you following this case? And if you can you provide us with some sort of context as if there appears to be any kind of, you have state health commissions, right? You have state medical boards. Is there a discussion among other doctors with you to try to address some of the facts that you're presenting on your website to the public on a more larger scale?
Yeah, I mean, there's a growing movement. I'm connected with doctors all over the world who believe the same thing as I do. There was a declaration signed by 16,000 physicians around the world supporting what I believe in, early COVID treatment and questioning the vaccines. So yes, there's a big network. Next weekend, there's a big march in Washington. January 23rd, I will be there. It's a peaceful march. And there'll be lots of speakers, people, Peter McCullough, those types of speakers there. So it's growing. I have hope that, the truth will come out. It just may take some more time.
What is this talking?
Sorry?
What is this talking? What is this talking? This experience of getting thrust into this situation? What is it?
What's it cost me? I can't hear you with your mask on.
Sorry.
Taught me. What is it?
What is this talking? Obviously, you got thrust into this situation. What is this talking?
Was it taught me? Okay. It's been hard to digest. It's happened so fast. It's hard to even digest. But I'm plugging along, and I'm standing up for what I believe in, and it actually just sort of comes naturally to me. I'm kind of wired that way, but it hasn't defeated me. If anything, it's just made me stronger. Amen. Jack.
What do you want, in your opinion, to change? What do you want to change by the end of 2022? What do you
Excellent question. Excellent question.
From what it looks like now, what do you want it to look like at the end of 2022?
God, there's a long list, but at first, get rid of media censorship. Mainstream media cover both sides. Both sides deserve to be heard. So I thank y'all for coming out today. I think there's got to be medical freedom, as I talked about, and doctors can't be scared to question the narrative. I think ivermectin needs to stop being such a dirty word. I don't understand why it's such a safe drug. I don't understand how it's become so controversial. And then we need to see more data. We need the vaccine data to be very transparent, more transparent than it is. And let patients make informed decisions and not have the government telling you what you have to have injected into your body. I mean, it's an individual choice.
Two questions. Hi, Dr. Brown. I have two questions. I just printed this out from the dailymed.nlm.nih.gov website, and it lists ivermectin as stromatol having a human prescription drug label, packager being Merck. So it can be used for humans. Of course, we know the news, social media, Facebook is listing it as being a horror story or so on and so forth. Right. Why are they refusing to acknowledge that ivermectin per .gov website can be used for humans?
Well, yeah, I mean, there are lots of medications that have applications in animals and humans, so that argument is completely worthless. Yeah, I mean, it's a safe drug, it's time tested. I will not be prescribing any of these new drugs coming out for COVID. They're not time tested like ivermectin, and until they can prove to me that they're safe, I will not be prescribing those.
So I actually do have one more, it's a related question. I went just really quickly through PubMed.gov. If anyone wants to go to that website, PubMed.gov, did a really quick search, found a study, a 5-day course of ivermectin for the treatment of COVID may reduce the duration of illness. Found a second study, ivermectin, a new candidate therapeutic against SARS-CoV-2 COVID-19. And then there's a third study, antiviral and anti-inflammatory properties of ivermectin and its potentially used in COVID-19. So there are studies that show that ivermectin is very useful against COVID. Why are the likes such as Facebook and whatnot saying that it's misinformation to say that ivermectin can be used to fight COVID?
Well, why is a good question, because I mean there are more than just 3 studies supporting the use of ivermectin. So it makes you wonder why. Is there some ulterior motive that is going on?
I have a question for you.
Okay, ladies first.
Wouldn't you agree that when they found a positive side effect of Viagra, that they, they eventually moved that into mainstream for its other positive side effects? If we're finding a positive side effect of ivermectin or any other natural born derived medication, which they turned into medication, shouldn't we be listening to educated doctors who are seeing that positive change and treat patients accordingly for the positive changes that it's working in?
Exactly. It's not financially lucrative to use repurposed drugs. So.
Are you aware that Houston Methodist early on took a survey of all their employees if they would take the COVID vaccine at no charge? The majority of them answered they would not take it, then they offered them a stipend of $500 each.
Oh, yeah.
They changed the whole thing around. If I'm not mistaken, Houston Methodist Hospitals paid out over $13 million to their employees to take the COVID vaccine, and now they're demanding they take the booster or they will be fired by March 31st.
Yes,
Are you aware of that?
Yes, very well aware of that. Thank you for pointing that out.
That's disgusting.
You have a question?
Have you noticed any doctors that, let's say, used to not like question the dangers of vaccines and that sort of thing, that have since changed their mind to start doing so?
Me.
I mean, but others besides yourself.
Oh yes, there are people, but they're quiet about it because of what happens when you speak out. I mean, it's hard for me to estimate, but there's 16,000 out there who have been willing to sign their name. There are probably more that we just don't know about, but. Oh, yes, hi.
I'm just curious about the accessibility of ivermectin now. I know that monoclonal antibodies are being restricted, but is ivermectin still available?
It is, but you have to jump through hoops. I can't send a prescription to Walgreens, CVS, HEB, Kroger, any of those. I have to go to compounding pharmacies. I have patients worried that's going to show up on their record and that they're going to be, penalized for that by their doctor is going to see it. I mean, it's ridiculous, and insurance companies won't pay for it, and it's become a very expensive drug because of that. I mean, it's typically very inexpensive, but because of all these hoops, it's become very expensive.
Can you talk more about the lawsuit you're going to file?
Yeah. I'm gonna let Steve handle that.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for being here. My name is Stephen Mitby. I'm Dr. Bowden's attorney. I'm proud to represent this doctor here who is standing up for freedom. She's standing up for patient choice. She's standing up for early treatment of people with COVID-19, and she's standing up for the right to try. If we had more doctors like this in Houston and throughout the United States, I suspect that the death toll and the health toll from COVID would be a lot lower. The reason why I'm so proud to represent the reason why I'm so proud to represent Dr. Bowden is because she's standing alone, and she has the courage to stand up to hospitals and government and institutions that are denying the people of this country the right to early treatment and the right to try safe drugs off-label that have been shown to reduce the symptoms of COVID-19. That's why Dr. Bowden is calling for transparency from Houston Methodist, and will be calling for transparency from other institutions as well, to show why it is that they're so against these early treatments, why they're denying doctors the right to prescribe and the right to use early treatments that have been considered safe and effective for years, like ivermectin. Dr. Bowden is filing a lawsuit to achieve that transparency and to require Houston Methodist to follow its obligations under Texas law to disclose financial information and disclose data about side effects. That's all she's doing. She's not seeking a penny in compensation for this. She's not seeking damages. She's simply asking for transparency and for following the law. And so I think everybody in Houston should be proud of what she's doing, standing up for people who have not had a voice in this matter.
Were there any negotiations beforehand or conversations with Houston Methodist prior to the lawsuit being filed?
Sure. Dr. Bowden and her press representative, Mr. Wayne Dolcefino, sent letters by certified mail to Houston Methodist requesting this information, invoking the relevant Texas statutes requiring them to do so. They didn't receive a response, and so the next step is to enforce those obligations under the law.
Did Houston Methodist, as we know, many agencies in Texas do this, did they kick it to the AG for an opinion, or did they just not? Nothing way?
No response.
Doctor, why is it so important for you to know that data? Why is it so important?
Well, first of all, they're required to by law. So why is it so hard for them to not give it to us? I mean, what are they hiding? Second of all, I mean, there's just, if the public is going to trust these big institutions, then they're going to have to regain the trust of the public, and this is a way to do it. If they believe in what they're pushing on people, then show us the data, and we can decide. But there's just not enough data out there. I mean, it's just severely lacking.
Hopefully, they won't take 75 years to provide the information.
That's a good question. Your experience, what's the difference in efficiency and safety profile between hydroxychloroquine and ivermectin?
I lean towards ivermectin. Well, I start with ivermectin first, just because hydroxychloroquine can, in very rare cases, have some side effects. But I will add hydroxychloroquine for the more severe cases, and withhold it for people that may have an underlying condition where there might be a risk. So.
Okay, one more question.
Governor Abbott was involved in the rollout with Methodist Hospital System. Obviously, there's been this position that you have now. And by any chance, have you reached out to the governor and to his office about asking for the transparency, considering the fact that there's been a relationship between Methodist and the governor's office?
We haven't gotten to that step yet. But it's
Fire
a good idea.
Quick follow. Is that a step you're looking at?
I am now, yes.
I want to add one thing to that. I personally reached out to Abbott's office back in May, and they told me there was nothing they could do to help the employees. They stepped away, did nothing to help. He did not put out his action until we put so much pressure on him that it required him to do something. He did not care prior to that. He is okay. He is perfectly okay with letting everyone get fired over it. He did not want to help anybody.
What's your name, ma'am?
Jennifer Bridges.
Thank you, Jennifer.
You're welcome.
Be Jennifer Bridges.
Yeah, I had a whole bunch to say about all that, but in efforts to keep this video just under an hour, I went ahead and had to bite my tongue a whole bunch. But I think maybe by now you can see my reasoning for putting these two videos together, and this is something we will be discussing a lot more here in the Change Jar.
My superhuman might, kryptonite.